So today we're very pleased to have Cartoon Network Presents, which is a program of short films which have really not been seen outside of festivals. So you should be really thrilled to see these special works today. And we have a few episodes of some favorite shows that our alumni have worked on, including both Regular Show, who's a Regular Show fan, and Steven Universe. So we have three of our alumni. We actually have a ton of alumni who work at Cartoon Network, including people like Rebecca Sugar and Ian Jones-Cordy. And we also have three people here today who I am thrilled to have with us. Kat Morris, Mike Roth, and Hillary Florido. Did I pronounce that right, Hillary? Where are you, Hill? They're here today, and they'll talk after we watch the films and tell you a little bit about their work. But I want to start the program today with someone really special who I'm thrilled to have here by the name of Mark Newgarden. Mark is also an alumnus of SVA, and he is one of the co-creators of Garbage Pail Kids. Do we have any Garbage Pail Kids fans here? Yeah, it was more my generation. And actually, we were talking to Mike from Cartoon Network, and I heard it's one of his inspirations, so that's really, really cool. Mark has a short that we're going to show today called Cartoons and You, which I think is hilarious, and we're going to show that before the Cartoon Network program. And I have a few special things to show in a keynote while Mark is up here. We're going to bring Mark up with our student moderator from our undergraduate animation department, Shannon Bainey. So let's bring Mark and Shannon up. They're going to do a quick Q&A, and then we'll show all the films. Welcome, Mark and Shannon.
So to start off, I'd actually really like to know about your times at SVA, since we're back here. I hope you feel welcome. So tell us some fun memories from SVA that you had.
Wow. I don't know. I started SVA in 1978, graduated in 82. It's a very different place.
What's different about it?
Physically, it was covered from wall to ceiling with graffiti.
Oh, okay.
Keith Heron was one of my classmates, and he was largely responsible for a lot of that.
Oh, wow.
We had a really interesting set of professors at the moment. Among my teachers, I had Harvey Kurtzman, Will Eisner, Art Spiegelman, sort of an all-star cast of comics teachers.
Oh, yeah, that sounds really great.
Yeah. And some of my professors are still teaching at SVA.
Oh, really? Who are they?
Marty Abrams, I believe.
Yeah. I know Marty.
Yeah. Probably a few others.
That's awesome. So I guess I would love to get into Garbage Pail Kids. My brother actually had his whole door dressed in Garbage Pail Kid stickers. I'd love to know how you created Garbage Pail Kids and how it became so popular. If you ever thought that it would be this popular.
Well, it's a long tangled story. Basically, I went to work for the Topps Chewing Gum Company. Art Spiegelman, who had worked there since he was a teenager, and was one of my teachers, invited me in. They were looking for some young blood at the moment. And one of the staples of Topps non-sports cards were this thing called Wacky Packages, which are still around and among us. And this was my idea for a Garbage Pail Kid Wacky Package.
Is that the first?
That was my first rough sketch.
Oh, wow.
Meanwhile, the man that ran Topps was trying to negotiate with the Cabbage Patch people, who didn't want to have anything to do with Topps.
That's funny.
And they decided, hey, let's just take this and spin a series out of it. So that was our assignment, and we did it, and we did it, and we did it, and we did it, and we did it.
Wow, that's awesome. My other question is, I heard that you had a new book coming out.
I do.
Yeah, would you like to talk about that? I
have a book coming out that actually relates a little bit to my time as a teacher at SVA. I can't claim authorship for this one, but I can get behind the message. This is some of my weekly comic strips that were published in a book called We All Die Alone, and some of my children's book work. And this is a new book coming out in November, How to Read Nancy, The Elements of Comics in 3 Easy Panels, based on a course that Paul Karasik and I taught at SVA many years ago. And I would, if you have any interest in making comics, I think it's worth taking a look at.
Oh, wow. I actually read, too, that you had Jerry Lee Lewis do a forward for you guys.
Absolutely.
Tell me how you got in contact with him.
We had him do 2 forwards.
2 forwards?
Actually, through a SVA friend, Drew Friedman, who was a friend of Jerry's. Drew gave us his business address, said, go ahead, send it to him, you'll never hear from him. He literally called the next day and said, I'm going to do a forward for your book, and then proceeded not to do one.
How long did it take to get the
About
forward?
6 months for the first one, and a little bit longer for the one that we wound up in the book.
Oh, really? Wow.
If you want to read the details, there's an article on Boing Boing right now that kind of goes into the nitty-gritty, but ultimately we did get Mr. Lewis to do a forward, which was wonderful.
That's awesome. So I also have another question about how you transitioned into the literary field, because I know you were doing Garbage Pail Kids, but now you have a couple of books come out.
I've always considered myself a cartoonist, and I've worked in a variety of places and spheres, including Cartoon Network. I put in my time there. But print has always been my first love, and I've returned to it more recently, doing books for both children and adults. And that's what I'm up to these days.
Oh, that's awesome. So you said you worked at Cartoon Network. What did you do at Cartoon Network, since we have Cartoon Network people here?
I was there at the very, very early dawn of Cartoon Network, and I did a bunch of really weird, interesting projects. The sort of most high-profile project I did was something that in the earliest days of the internet, there were two series that were launched called World Premiere Tunes. One of them was mine, Be Happy. The other one was something called Pink Donkey.
Pink Donkey.
Pink Donkey. These came out in 1999. They were made in Flash 2.0.
Wow.
We're talking about, and Cartoon Network told us after these came out, these will live on the internet forever.
Now I gotta look them up.
And now I don't even think they've been transferred to a format that is playable today, unfortunately. But they were interactive shows. They were a lot of fun to work on, and I wound up doing a bunch of stuff with them over the years, including developing a much longer feature-length project, which unfortunately never saw the light of day.
Oh, that's too bad. You actually didn't. Wasn't there a Garbage Pail Kids movie that was a feature length? Do you have
There
anything to
was.
say about
I
that?
had absolutely nothing to do with that.
Oh, well, that's too bad.
I'm proud to say. Possibly one of the worst films, if not the absolute worst film ever made in the history of motion pictures. I have no problem saying that in front of you. Let's hear it for how bad that movie is. There's me blowing my brains out in front of the billboard. I think that's on Santa Monica Boulevard.
So we're gonna wrap it up now. Thank you so
Sure.
much again for coming to SVA
Thank you.
and talking. Let's give it a hand for Mark.
Thank you all.
So Hillary graduated from SVA Cartooning Department in 2007. She's created numerous self-published comics and has had honorable mentions in America's Best Comics and illustrated a graphic novel for First Second. She started storyboarding for Regular Show in 2011, received an Emmy nomination for the Christmas special, and then moved to boarding for Steven Universe in 2013. She's currently working as storyboard supervisor for Steven Universe. Kat Morris was born and raised in New York. Her thesis film at SVA, The Story of One-Eyed Ophelia Jackson, won the Dusty Award for Outstanding Achievement in Animation. The Dusties are our annual awards and film festival for our undergraduate film and animation programs. That's in May, and it's free and open to the public if you want to come back. She's interned at Augenblick Studios, Aaron Augenblick, who's another animator who's also an SVA alum, and then moved to California to work for Cartoon Network, where she is currently the supervising director on Steven Universe. Finally, Mike Roth is a co-executive producer of Cartoon Network's Emmy-winning Artist Program, where he's involved in the development and oversight of the production pipeline for the studio's shorts, many of which have moved on to series, including Summer Camp Island and Craig of the Creek. Prior to this, he was supervising producer on CN's Emmy Award-winning Regular Show, for which he won in 2012 for his writing and producing. Mike also wrote and storyboarded a number of other animated shows, including Cartoon Network's The Marvelous Misadventures of Flapjack, Disney Channel's Phineas and Ferb, Nickelodeon's SpongeBob SquarePants, and Paramount's features SpongeBob SquarePants Movie, The Wild Thornberrys, and Rugrats in Paris.
So I just want to start it off by maybe going back in time to SVA when you guys were doing your theses. So why don't you start off and tell me how you worked on your thesis and how that process was?
Sure thing. Well, I'm actually a little unusual. I didn't study animation at Cartoon Network. I was in the cartooning department, and so I didn't have a thesis film. I did make a comic. Our theme for it was the man-made monster. And kind of the thing I remember most about it is you're assigned 15 pages, and I was like overachiever, and I did 30. And I also didn't leave my apartment for a week. And it was a little dark, but it was great. It felt really good to have all that space, and now I can't look at it at all.
Do you still have it at all?
I don't know.
I have it.
It's so weird.
So yeah, Hillary.
Cat. Yeah, my thesis year was a very dark pit of hell. I had like a full class load, and I was working, and I was interning at Augenblick, and I was trying to fit in my film whenever possible, which was usually up until about 2 a.m. when they kicked us out of the studio, and I would just walk all the way back to my dad's house. I cracked a rib coughing because I got really sick, but I couldn't go to the doctor because I was so busy. And I can't look at that film anymore. But people seem to enjoy it, so I'm glad.
I'm into it. I love that film.
But I mean, it's amazing to like have created an entire film, a product that people can see and say, yeah, that is a distillation of me for better or worse.
I'm so sorry about your cracked rib.
Oh, it's okay. I just didn't sneeze or cough, and it was okay.
There was no laughter at that time anyway, so it was fine.
Mike?
So my thesis film, I really focused on animating, so I never took it past the pencil test, but it was complete. I really wanted to be like a feature animator at that time, so I spent a lot of time on my drawing portfolio, which I spent a lot of time in Steve Gaffney's class. I used to go to his class all the time. He's great, guys. He's really good. And my thesis advisor is Howard Beckerman. So my thesis film, I'm proud of the animation of it, but never really was finished. So.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Do you ever think about going back and finishing it?
No.
You should finish your films.
Yeah. Finish
Don't
films.
give up.
Yes.
So my next question is, so after SVA, you guys had to, find jobs, and how was that transition into, I guess, the adult world? Was it smooth? Was it rocky? And is there anything you would do better?
Let's see. So in those days, there wasn't a lot of SVA people moving to LA. So when I got to LA, I didn't have a lot of friends from SVA. I would say, like, for me, like, all the drawing and all the drawing classes that I took, like, really helped me a lot. So when I got into the industry, I could draw pretty well. So that was really helpful. Yeah.
What was your, I guess, first call? Like, who did you go to first to, like, find a job, and were you successful in that?
Yeah. So let's see. I had various jobs while I was at school. I did some stuff for Cartoon Sushi. I did some stuff for SNL and for the Rosie O'Donnell show. But my first official job when I graduated was at this studio called Doghouse Animation, which doesn't exist anymore. And there's kind of a funny story about that.
Ooh, continue. Do tell.
So I got the job. I'm like 2 weeks into it. And I go in one day, and the guy who owned the studio called me into his office. And he said, I got good news and I got bad news. I said, well, what's the bad news? He said, I'm closing the studio down. I'm like, oh, great. This is my first gig. This is terrible. I'm like, well, what's the good news? He's like, I'm going to be a sequence director on Rugrats in Paris, and I want you to come and be a storyboarder for me. I was like, that's great. When do we leave? I leave tomorrow. You leave on Saturday. So I packed. I went home, told my family. I moved to LA with like a suitcase and $180.
Wow, that's awesome.
But it worked out. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, Kat, would you like?
Yeah. When I graduated, I didn't get any jobs for about a year. I was just working at a hospital part-time and living at my dad's place. But then I just slowly started to pick up work from friends who had to pass on freelance because they already had jobs. So I helped Jacob Ospa, who's no longer here, work on a Christmas-related music video. And then I started getting calls from like Curious and another place that I can't recall at the moment. But finally, my thesis film was put online on Cartoon Brew, and J.G. Quintel, the creator of Regular Show, saw it, and he asked me to take a design test and a storyboard test. And I did well enough on the storyboard test that he asked me to come out to LA again, within a 5-day span.
Always.
And then while I was working there, Rebecca started developing Steven Universe, and we knew each other through SVA as well. I was a year above her. And she asked me if I wanted to work on the show, and if I did, what I wanted to do. And I was just like, anything, just let me work with you. I love your pilot so much. And there's history.
That's awesome. That's such a cute story. I'm glad SVA Connections helped you like later in life.
Yeah, I think that's like the number one reason to go to art school, more than the classes, just to meet people. Because I mean, it's your peers that push you and inspire you the most.
I believe that too. All right, Hillary?
So I actually got a book deal my senior year at SVA with illustrating on a book for First Second. So it feels like it would have been like, yes, it's so easy. But even when you have it all set up for you, sometimes it doesn't work out. This did end up working out, but it was a very long journey and emotional. It's whatever. Graduating college is really hard, even if you're doing well. But I finished it. And then I did weird freelance work. Lots of reception and work. It's out there, ready for you. And then it was actually people, but I was still making mini comics and going to like small press expos, and it was meeting people there. Actually, I think it was Calvin Wong who got me the regular show test, and I tested, and I'd never seen the show before, and I was like, oh, I don't want to watch it before I take the test. I'll be like too influenced. But it worked out, and yeah, and then I kept on rolling.
That's awesome. My next question, I guess, is to Kat. While I was Googling you, I saw kind of a cute factoid. It said that you created Connie on Steven Universe. Is that true?
Oh, I mean, I think it's a little extreme to say I created her alone, but I did do the first episode that she appeared in, and Rebecca wanted to make her kind of weird and quiet, but I think we ended up sort of shifting. Actually, I did that episode with Alan Romanilos, who's another SVA alum. We graduated together. Yeah, we helped shape. I like the idea of her being quiet, but rather than weird, I kind of wanted to explore sort of like the feeling of isolation that you can have as a kid when you're not really sure about, who you are and how to really interact with people. She kind of goes into that sort of stuff in other episodes, like Stefani, where she has sort of dance anxiety Hillary worked on.
That was my first official episode. Something easy to just
but yeah, I mean,
get into the Steven Universe world.
In animation, it's a baton pass. You do something and someone else builds on it. Like, there's so many facets to her personality that other people have added that I'm just happily applauding and pushing forward as I direct.
That's awesome, knowing that you had a hand in the creating of Connie. Is there any other characters that you had a hand in developing?
Yeah, I remember on regular show, there's this character, CJ, and the outline... I don't know if you remember this, Mike. I was really put off by it because she just came off as so irrational. Like, oh, women, they just get so crazy. And I couldn't have it. I was like, no, she's going to be really cool. She's going to be really down to earth. And you're really going to understand why she gets upset at the end of the episode. And there's a huge climactic conflict. So I was pretty proud of that one. Eileen, too. I wanted Eileen to be a super weirdo. Although I think I kind of pushed the romance aspect a little bit too much in the episode that she first appears in, and then she kind of gets scaled back, and she's a little bit cooler and more scientific once Minty really took over writing for her.
Well, I'm glad you had that input and I guess made her more of a 3D character or more
that's
in-depth
been
character.
My hope. I think that's kind of why I wanted to grab that Connie episode. I was like, oh, I'm riding high on these characters. I just want to keep making really cool girls.
That's
I
awesome.
mean, girls don't have to be cool. There are different ways to be cool, but
that definitely shows in the characters CJ and Connie. My next question is for Mike. You are producing, and I was wondering what that entails, because I feel like the average person doesn't really know what a producer does.
Yeah. Well, I think there's different types of producers. There's the types of producers that mainly deal with scheduling and money and that type of thing. The type that I do is more on the art end. So as a co-executive producer of the Shorts Department, in a sense, I'm sort of like a showrunner. So the creators come in, and then I'm there to just kind of assist them through all the steps of the process, because I helped run regular show. I have a lot of experience with that type of stuff. So, from story through storyboards, all the way through sound mixing and that. Oftentimes, creators, a lot of creators at Cartoon Network are younger. like in their early 20s or later 20s, and so they come in with like a lot of experience in like one discipline, like storyboarding, but they might not have done music and sound effects and those types of things. So I'm kind of there to just help guide them through that process, and you know, and each creator's different in what they need. So
you're like everyone's Obi-Wan.
Exactly.
yeah,
like
I
that.
like that. Yeah, let's go with that.
There's a bunch of little Padawans everywhere.
Yeah, but no, it's a very unique position, but it's really fun for me because I get to work on all these different types of styles, and each short has its own like problems to solve. Like Summer Camp Island, for example, Julia Pott had this very distinctive drawing style, and it was almost like copying her signature. You know, it's like you can't do that. So how do we get that style like into the show? So we had her just like clean up the whole board, and we shipped it, and we said just use her drawings as keys. That's it. And if you do that, everything will be great. And it worked.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Okay, so my next question is for Hillary. I actually love your dog, and I'm still thinking about him. I was wondering if he... I was wondering if he ever influenced your work, like his little doggy characteristics, or if you have any more influences, like how you get people's different personalities when you draw storyboards.
Well, this dog is kind of new, so he hasn't had a real time to imprint in Steven Universe. I mean, certainly for writing characters, observation and talking to people and reading stuff and really collecting from the world around you, which is richer when you step outside your immediate space, and then you kind of process it and it comes out.
Just live a very full life.
Talk to people you don't like, talk to people you do like. Yeah, and pull from everything, because it's the small things that make a work rich.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now we're going to open it up to the audience, so feel free to come to each mic on either side to ask questions for these lovely people.
Also, we Skyped and she saw my dog, so
yeah.
That's where that came from.
You don't need to raise your hand. You can just come down to the mic if you like.
Sorry, I'm a big guy. It's okay. Hi. Well, first, thanks for coming out. Now, I'm currently applying. I graduated a few months ago, and I'm applying to a lot of studios right now. You said that you mostly got into Cartoon Network through connections. Were you applying to studios directly, and what was your success rate with that, if there was any?
I mean, for me, I got freelance animation jobs here in New York through connections at first. Just a friend saying, "Hey, I can't do this. Are you interested?" I mean, just like snapping it up and then building a relationship from there. But when it came to Cartoon Network, I actually was just found through my film. I wasn't entirely sure how to go about looking for jobs, which I think was part of my problem. I just assumed that because I was like doing a CIFA East and people knew my face, that if I had a demo reel, it would be enough. So I can't exactly speak to what it takes. But now that I'm on the hiring end of things, I know usually there's like a department that will, like, they'll find out who needs jobs for what, and then they will call people. So if you submit, you'll be in that list. Like, people will know. Like, definitely have a website with your email address. Please, please, please. There's no reason not to put your email address on your website. It's very frustrating when people are trying to contact you. But yeah, you will be on file, and then people will be able to look through your stuff and ask you to take a test if they're interested. And you can also like refresh the studio and be like, "Hey, I applied like a year ago," just letting you know that I updated my website, and I would, love to do whatever the job you're interested in is.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I would say just keep putting yourself out there. Have a website, take as many tasks as you can, and just stay in touch with recruiters. And yeah, I mean, that's really the trick. And then people will know to find you, and when the right show pops up, and that's the perfect work for what we need. But we won't know that unless if your work is out there.
Yeah, definitely be active on the internet, because we're on the internet. We're looking at stuff. We're not always hiring,
we're not
but
that
we're always
old.
looking at people, and we'll think back of like, "Oh yeah, that person was really great. Let me go check their site again. Yep, still good. Let's ask them."
Yeah. And one of the things that is always difficult is finding those artists that can both write and storyboard. That's a very difficult position to fill. And for regular show, at a certain point, we started looking into the comic world. So like, oh, there's all these people who can write, and they're really good writers, and they're very good drawers. They might not have like the academic knowledge of like film language yet, but we can teach that. It's Hillary, everybody.
We're talking about Hillary.
But regular show, I mean, I don't mean to brag, but I feel like at one point we had one of like the most talented writing crews. I mean, we had so many powerhouses, and so many of them were found on the internet, and they were comic people. And Calvin helped a lot.
Yeah, Calvin did help. But yeah, JG saw my mini comics, and I mean, you can know plenty of people, but you do have to have something to back that up. And he had a bunch of my mini comics, and was like, oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, so we're gonna go take a question on this side.
This is kind of a follow-up to Hillary. What advice would you have for a cartooning student who wants to get into the animation field?
That's tricky because I didn't necessarily like aim for it, but make comics, write comics, get them out into the world, put them on the internet. If you're ultimately animation is storytelling. It's not quite an even transfer when you do it, but if you can storytell, you can storytell, and that's valuable. So get your work out there is really what. Make stuff. Just make stuff and get it out there.
I would add, definitely get your foundation strong. Like, being able to lay characters out onto a background is so important. Like, regardless of the style, some are more naturalistic than others. But if you can construct a character, if you can draw a background, if you know how to set up shots in a sequence where the images don't pop and it's not confusing and everybody is, like, moving in the right direction, that is, like, so desirable and not always attained in the tests that we get. So really, really focus on your craft.
And I would add to that, if you're like, well, how do I get that knowledge? Find your favorite movies, and just every time there's a cut, pause it, and just do a thumbnail of what that composition is. And then you'll have a sequence of basically how someone else constructed storytelling for that particular project. And just practice, practice, practice.
I actually do that. That's one of the things that I do even now.
Awesome.
I've done it.
Thanks, guys.
I've done it too.
So whoever's in line now, those are going to be our questions. There's a lot of questions here. So anyone else, just stay seated, and hopefully you can get these guys in the lobby. But we'll throw it over to you.
Hello. I have a question. Obviously. So with some of these cartoons, like Regular Show and Steven Universe, or that short, I think, Unlovable, that's what it was, they're presented either in exaggerated version of reality or like a version of our reality but with fantastical elements added. But then others, like The Fancies and Summer Camp Island, they take place in completely foreign to us landscapes that has its own reality and set of rules attached to it. So my question is, for the latter category, which is a whole different place with a whole different rules you have to establish, how exactly do you successfully world build that without it being too clunky?
I could take that.
Yeah.
I'll start. I'm sure everybody has different opinions on this. So for me, I think it's always finding that frame of reference that everybody can connect to. So like, nobody knows what time traveling is, right? We've never done it, but probably most people have had a bad kiss moment. So like, that's the entry point. That's the point at which like everybody has a frame of reference to. So if you have that as your base, then you can build off of that the fantasy sequence. In fact, when we were watching Steven Universe, I leaned over to the cat and I said, Steven Universe is so great because it's like these little boutique pieces of slice of life, but inside this huge, vast fantasy world. So you can totally relate and connect, even though you've never been in a world with little mushroom characters that are running around and eat through their feet. But if you...
Yeah, I guess one thing I think about a lot is knowing what the rules are, because you can make a totally far out world, but if people don't understand like what is far out and what is real, like if something is so fantastical, but then you add a fantasy like dream sequence, people won't know the difference if they don't know what like the ground rules of that reality is. So setting that up, I think, helps make your world more real. It's a little abstract, but.
And then as far as the act of setting it up, it's most digestible when you're integrating it to the story that's happening. The exposition in the fancies works, which usually just dropping a whole bunch of facts is not the smoothest thing, but it works so well in that because it's how the story's going. That's what the story is about, which is pretty great.
And with the fancies, one of the reasons we did those 2-minute shorts instead of a full short was because the world was so big and vast. And it's like, which story could you pick that would entertain and speak to all those different pieces? So we decided, let's just do a bunch of little stories, and then we can kind of feel that whole world out, you know. But at its core, it's still just Seth and Pascal, his brother, and their relationship to the world and the things around them.
Okay, awesome. So we're going to take it over
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi. You said you were one of the main creators of the character Connie in Steven Universe. Did you contribute mainly to their parents, too?
Yeah, actually. I mean, I didn't directly storyboard that episode, but I was in the room and working on those characters. I named them. They're Doug and Priyanka Maheshwaran. Yes, I was around for that.
Thank you.
That guy has an excellent hat. It's awesome. I didn't even know they went out to the public. Sorry, I geeked out.
Over here.
Hi. So in terms of storyboarding, I know like shows that are like 11 minutes, usually like regular show and Steven Universe, are board driven. So like you just get an outline and then like you write most of the episode itself, as opposed to something else that's script driven, where like you get a script and you're mostly just transferring that into visuals. So I was wondering, like, what are the pros and cons of doing board driven versus like doing scripts? Like, I know, because obviously there are benefits, but are there like maybe negatives with it too? And also, is it like, do you see it becoming a more widespread thing? Like, is it becoming more frequent to do it that way?
I could start. I've done both. When I started in the business, it was basically unheard of. Shows that were premise driven were basically unheard of. You had Ren and Stimpy, and then SpongeBob, which was just kind of getting started. In those days, like writers, they pretty much they were the main piece, and artists would come in and they would just take the script and write from there, or just board from there. One of the pros to that, obviously, is you have a little bit more control over the writing because only a couple people are doing it. But I think that what's really great about premise-driven stuff is I think so much of the writing also comes through the visuals. And in a sense, if you have the right writers and the right team, instead of having a couple people write, you have 12 storyboarders who are all writing and all contributing life experiences to stuff. And so I feel like that process, though it's a little bit more complicated in some ways, I feel like you kind of get a richer texture of everything, and it feels like there's just a deeper dive into each story, in my opinion. But scripted shows are also amazing too. But
I think, like Mike was saying earlier, one of the biggest problems is just really, really hard to staff up. You know, somebody can be a really amazing writer, but they're not quite there as a draftsman, or vice versa. You have a great artist whose jokes are just so unbearable. And I think, you have to try to find the people that you can train up. Nobody is like an expert right away, and they shouldn't be. But it is really hard, and it also can make the results a little inconsistent at times. Again, it depends on your team, but teams also fluctuate as people find other jobs or just go do something else, get their own shows. And then the people working on the boards after they've been handed in end up having to do like a lot of recon to try to get it to where it needs to be. Especially, I think on regular show, it would be more like a joke pass. But on Steven, there are times where we have to like backtrack the message and make sure that we're hitting the story that we wanted to hit. Or if the message has changed, we're going back and making sure that everything lines up and that we're still pushing the right thing forward.
And I would say on a personal level, as an artist, being a boarder on a premise-driven show, if it's going to be a good episode, you have to kill all your babies. You have to let go. You write all these jokes, and you think these jokes are awesome. You think these jokes are so good. You laughed when you wrote them, but they fall into a silent room. You got to give it up. You have to be ready to take out a whole section that you spent hours and hours drawing that you love this perspective. No, you have to do it over, and you have to be okay with that. And that's what makes an episode good.
Can I add to that real quick? Killing your babies. When I first got into the business, every drawing was super precious. I was like, I drew it. I didn't want to let go of it. And I saw this video with Glenn Keane, and he was drawing, and he was doing drawings way better than anything I could ever do. And he messed up, and he's like, and he threw it in the trash and just started over. And I was like, wait, what was that? And I think it's really important as an artist to just be able to let go of stuff. And if it's not working for what you're fighting for in that moment, you just have to kill it and move on.
Thank you.
Okay, over here.
What was your favorite show to work on?
Oh, I feel like I can't answer this.
That's a trick question because Mike was our boss on regular show.
I like them all for different reasons.
I'm going to go with, that. It's true.
They're all special in their own way, just like children.
Oh, that was beautiful. That was really beautiful. I actually get asked this question a lot because I'm in shorts. I work on all these different shorts. And this is true. So this is a true answer. It's whatever I'm on in that moment ends up being my favorite because that's what I'm putting most of my time and what I'm investing in that moment. So that's my answer to it. They're all
Awesome.
really fun.
Over here.
So how was it transitioning from college to a full-time studio situation, and what are some of the ways in which you've kind of grown in terms of your creative forces as well as kind of work-life stuff?
I think when I was a student, I was very self-deprecating, and I know that sounds crazy because I have been self-deprecating on this very stage, but I think once you have to produce so much work all the time and you realize that no matter how much you make it personal, ultimately you're creating a product and there's so many people outside of yourself helping make it, it helps you just produce more faster, and just that alone, just making things makes you more confident. And I feel like through the act of having made so much at this point, I don't stop myself short. Because something that happens a lot with artists, especially younger artists, is that they get so inside their own head about God, this isn't good enough. Maybe I'll do it again later when I'm better. But it freezes you, and only making work is going to make you better. Getting in your own way will only stunt you. And so that's my answer. I think I'm a little less in my own way.
Do you guys have anything else to add?
I don't know. It's always really hard transitioning into anything, even transitioning as a storyboarder into another storyboarding position. Just embrace that struggle, man. It's like when you're a teenager. There's nothing you can do about it. You just gotta power through, and then hopefully bring the best out of it.
Your experience.
I think all of you kind of said it. I mean, it's every new show I go on is a new set of challenges and just all new things to learn. So transitioning from student to artist was a huge step, but then transitioning from feature to television was a huge step. And when I got my first writing gig, that was a huge step, So I feel you always have to be teachable, and if you're in that kind of state of mind, then you'll be fine.
Okay. Over here.
What's your least favorite?
Man, that's tough. Kat?
Wait, least favorite episode? What? Show? Least favorite what? Show.
We can also do least favorite aspects of the show.
I don't know that I have an active least favorite. I mean, one that I haven't worked on that many shows to have real enemies. I guess. I don't know. I don't know least favorite.
I don't think I have one. I think I've been lucky enough that I've worked on everything that I like so far. But I'll let you know in the future if anything comes up.
Things could turn at any moment.
How about like what's the most difficult to do on a show? Like what makes you, I guess, have to redo your work over and over again? Something that is like a struggle.
I mean, it's all a struggle. It's
Making the
animation.
show.
Every single aspect of it is completely exhausting. I guess just the minutia of things. Because like as a board artist, there's a point at which you stop. But when you're a director or a producer, and a creative producer, you have to make sure everything gets done. So all the tiny little things that get left behind have to be tied down. And like the closer you get to completion, the more you are incomplete. All the way up until you send it to the studio to play on television. And I was watching those things now, and I'm like, we missed that lip sync error. I can't.
That eye direction, I'm like, oh.
I have post vision where I'm like, all those scenes don't hook up. Oh, jeez. How do we let that through? Why is that sound effect still there? Oh, no.
I promise you, nobody notices.
Yeah, I know.
We all love it. We eat
It's
it
my
up.
gift and my curse.
Okay, so we'll take it over here.
All right. Sorry, hold on. I need to calm myself down a little bit. Okay. So yeah, I understand you guys made worked on 11-minute episodes as well. In the past, people worked on 24 episodes that consist of 2 episodes. And in most cases, what's also the experience like working, say, the regular show movie that came out 3 years ago? What was your experience working on that?
That was a huge assignment. There's a lot of hidden hours on that movie. What was it like? Look, anytime we get an assignment like that, it's super exciting at first. The sky's the limit.
At first.
And then you start getting into it, and you're in the creative process, and it's like you know you need an answer, but you don't even know what questions to ask yet. And it's so frustrating sometimes. But then when it starts coming together, and then you finally have it's working, and it's funny, and then you just kind of wish you could do it all over again. But yeah, I guess, yeah.
I didn't work on the regular show.
I didn't work on the regular show.
Yeah.
For the longer episodes, the ones that especially hook up, it's a lot more collaboration and a lot more attention to following your story and following your characters.
But we still kind of do think of it. We've been trained in 11 minutes pretty exclusively. So even a long format episode, we will think in chunks of 11, and then when we stitch them all together, we oversee the whole thing.
Yeah, and a lot of those longer format stuff, like if it's a 22-minute episode, a lot of them would come in at 35 minutes long, and then we'd have to ratchet them down. So it's just a lot of writing and rewriting. I would say from 11 minutes to 22 minutes isn't double the work, it's 4 times the work, because now you're tracking a B story and a C story, and all these things have to hook up and line up, and it's I don't know, cooking. It's you put the wrong spice in at the wrong time, and it's it doesn't taste right, so yeah.
Okay, last one over here.
Hey, how you guys doing? I have a question, very simple. What were your favorite cartoons growing up?
Oh my
Not
gosh.
that you animated, just your favorite.
Me? Should I start?
Yeah, do it.
Oh my gosh, I loved cartoons as a kid. I mean, I loved the Smurfs. I loved G.I. Joe. I loved all the classic Disney features. I loved Warner Brothers stuff. I couldn't get enough of cartoons. And my favorite thing was Sunday morning, opening up the newspaper and reading Calvin and Hobbes, and so yeah.
Yeah, I'm really similar. I just was always watching cartoons. They used to play all the Warner Brothers shorts on TNT around 6 o'clock every night, and I'd watch that religiously. And then Nickelodeon started doing creator-driven shows, so I was obsessed with Ren and Stimpy. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I found Duckman on USA, and I couldn't understand television timetables yet, but I knew that it was after Snick and Weird Science, the TV show. So if I just waited long enough on Saturday night, I would be able to see Duckman. What else? I liked MTV had a lot of shows. No, not a lot, but they had shows and commercials that I thought were amazing, like The Head and The Max. I just lived for anytime I caught it on MTV. And Ren and Stimpy was also on MTV sometimes. So it was all about any Viacom company related show, I guess I really liked. And then in junior high, I got super into anime. I loved Sailor Moon, I loved Pokemon, and it's sort of wow, we have Pokemon players in the audience. Yeah, and then it just it went down a really deep hole of anime for a long time. And then when I came to animation school, I kind of dug myself out a little bit. Now I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm like an anime casual.
You wish. So I have the strange experience that I wasn't allowed to watch TV on the weekdays. Boom, boom, family. So you could sneak some TV, so you had to really pick what you wanted. I remember sneaking Batman a lot. I really liked that. And then when the weekend hit, you get up so early to really start and catch up. And I remember I really loved The Muppet Show. So funny. And comics, Calvin and Hobbes. I did the anime thing. I'm still doing the anime thing.
Are you an anime
This
casual?
season is really weak. I'm excited for the next one.
If 15-year-olds could legally get tattoos, I'd have a huge Ren and Stimpy tattoo in my arm right now that I drew. But when I turned 18, I decided against it. Good decision.
Okay, over here.
Hi. So I know there's a lot of important aspects that go into storyboarding. Like, there's a lot of things in draftsmanship, but I wanted to know what personally you guys think is the most important thing to nail whenever you're doing boards, because I don't know. I had this all perfect in my head, and now I'm not.
That's
don't know
okay.
what I'm saying.
That's a good question.
I really think we have a lack of funny drawings. We need funnier drawings for comedy shows. Really go nuts, let loose. It's definitely important to be a good draftsman, as I said earlier. But there's also something we said, just be so weird.
Where is that character? What is that space? Give me something. That's important. That's important, yeah. Because no one can do anything. No one can make it better. No one can punch it up if there is nothing there. So know where your character is in space. That's the thing. Boarding.
I agree with both of those things. At the end of the day, people watch this stuff because they want to be entertained, right? So they want to see funny expressions. They want to see good acting. They want to see emotions, right? Sorry, Steve. I remember one time Steve said, he's like, Mike, when you're drawing, you're just telling a lie. You're telling everybody that this 2D thing is real and it exists in real space. So I think that's our job, is to convince people that what they're watching is real and it counts and it means something. And funny drawings. And if you're looking for funny drawings, look up this guy, Aaron Springer, because he is very good at funny drawings.
I just want to say, real doesn't mean naturalistic, still life, real portrait. Real can be a really stylized cartoon. It just has to reflect some aspect that's really internal to the human experience. It sounds lofty. It's not that lofty, but it doesn't have to be realistic to be good.
My favorite thing is doing just over-the-top expressive drawings. That's my forte. And I'm not great at doing realistic stuff, but I love just going over the top and being overly expressive. And so I really want to do storyboarding in the future and do acting and all that kind of good stuff. So that's good to know that that's important.
That's good news.
Yeah. Keep going. You got it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for the question. And then, little flower child. So beautiful.
Did your jobs ever get so hard that you had to, you wanted to quit?
All the time.
I mean, if you're asking if I've cried at work, I've cried at work.
These kids are asking
In
the
private.
hard questions.
You keep that private.
Yeah. The ones bring it. Yeah. Have you ever wanted to quit, Mike? Not when you were working with us, of course.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's intimidating sometimes, It's trying to find a good expression or something, and sometimes you question your own abilities. What am I doing here? I'm a fraud. I don't belong here, And then you figure it out, and you're like, I'm great. I'm a genius. This is so great, So, but I was given this piece of advice. I worked construction for a really long time. I was given this piece of advice one time, and this guy said to me, he's like, if you don't want to quit your job at least 3 times a year, you're not being challenged. I was like, oh, that's pretty good advice.
It's a great question. Thank you. Last question. Here we go.
Everybody has their own inspiration story. What were your stories?
inspiration story.
More specific.
Yeah,
Like just for art, like what inspired me to be like, I want to be drawing.
Can you be a little bit more specific with your question?
What I mean is like at the beginning, like when you guys were thinking of what you wanted to do when you grow, like from a young age or to the age that you guys are right now, what made you think that this is your future and this is what you want to do?
I think you were right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, I jumped around a lot. I really wanted to be a marine biologist, but my math was kind of weak. I really like English. I love stories. That worked out. But I mean, I didn't study that. And actually, when I was looking at colleges, I really liked animation, but I was like, oh, you got to work with other people. I got to share. I don't want to share. I want to share now. And it turned out, I mean, comics is a very solitary thing. But animation, you're working as a team. It's okay to change. I changed a lot, and it ended up being a really great thing.
For me, I was drawing just my whole life. I just really liked it. I don't really even like showing people my drawings. I just like drawing.
She'll cover them up.
Throw them out. I hide them under books. I don't. It's crazy. Like if you go to my room, there's like you just turn over something and there's like a ton of drawings underneath. But I didn't really think that was a viable career path. And then I did really, really badly on the SATs. Like I think maybe I got like 1,000. So I wrote my name and answered a few questions correctly. And I was like, well, I don't know where I'm going to get in now. And at the same time, on TV, there were commercials for an animation, not like college, but like an animation program. And they were like, anybody who starts at the beginning. And I was like, yeah, I guess if I did study animation, I would be a beginner. That seems right. And so I applied to art school instead of like Ivy Leagues, and I got into SVA. Actually, I got into Pratt too. I went to Pratt first, and I switched over to SVA. And I was a beginner. I was very much a beginner. And I graduated slightly less a beginner.
Yeah, for me, it's the same thing. I just always drew since I can remember. My mom, like as a kid, she was like, "Oh, every kid draws." And then I got to kindergarten. It's like, well, not every kid draws like that. But it didn't. My dad was a welder. I grew up in a steel/coal town in Pennsylvania. Like there was no models of artists like coming out of that place. So it didn't seem like a viable career. And I always continued with art and did different things. But I went to Kutztown University to be a teacher. And I took this art class, and the art teacher gave me a bunch of brochures. Maybe I shouldn't say this in public, but he gave me a bunch of brochures to go to art schools. He said, you need to get out of here. And he gave me a brochure to like a bunch of animation schools, and I got accepted to School of Visual Arts, and the rest was history. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Shannon, Mike, Kat, and Hillary. Give them a big round of applause. Thank you all for sticking around.